Welcome to Roundtable Mindset, the podcast where we seek to understand and share different perspectives in order to grow and challenge our own. And we encourage you, our guest, to do the same.
Each week, we will pick a topic to discuss sharing our own unique thoughts and insights. There will be times when we won't agree, and let's be real, that's probably going to be most of the time, and that's okay. We feel it's important to understand that we can live in this polarized world and still respect one another and even be friends.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Malin.
And we're back for another episode of Roundtable Mindset. We've got some great things to chat about today, but I guess we'll start with, how are you today, my friend?
I am doing so good. Let's see, what's been going different since the last time we talked? Nothing, and I think that's the good thing. Like, there's been no real disturbances. There hasn't been anything really to report. So it's kind of been just nice and easy going, which I don't know about you, but I always look for the other shoe to drop when that happens. So it's like, hey, everything's been going pretty well until it doesn't. And so I'm kind of just waiting for something to come out of the woodwork. But no, for the last little while, it's been pretty good. How about you?
Well, I don't want to talk about it. Cause yeah, it's been kind of crazy in my world lately. So yes, the other shoe will drop. So be prepared. But
how's that for a little?
It'll be fine.
How's that for a little ray of sunshine? Thanks, Jamie. Just wait, it's coming.
Well, isn't that kind of the nature of life? It totally cycles that way. So it just is what it is, and we just roll with it, and that's what makes us good, functioning human beings, right?
Wow. Okay. Whatever coffee drink you're having, I need one because that's some good stuff.
I feel like I'm not communicating effectively. No, it's not terrible. It's fine. Everything's fine. It just does get a little crazy sometimes. So
yeah, it does. Got to enjoy it when it's not, though, right?
Yes.
But
I think we have some news to share.
I was going to say, but I really want to get over, enough about us. We're boring. I would like to get over to where we talk about something we just launched, and that is our Patreon account.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, almost a year. We've been, as Jamie and I have been kind of going, through this whole podcasting journey from unboxing, we've mentioned that, to talk about all the different topics and getting things organized. We've kind of done a little bit of a reflection and seen where we've come from, where we want to go. And the Patreon page was one of those key components that we wanted to get out there. And we were successful to finally get that launched just a couple days ago. And so we have a variety of different, we're calling them tiers, a couple different options for people, from just plain old support, all the way to you get some exclusive offers and privileges that come with the higher tiers, just like a normal Patreon page. But yeah, a lot of hard work went into that, and it's kind of nice to see it come to fruition.
Yes. It's something we've talked about for a long time, and I'm excited that it's out there, and you guys get the opportunity to join us if you'd like. I guess we didn't really talk about this part of it, but I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to be like pimping out the Patreon page all the time, but definitely want you to know that it's available if you'd like to. And one of the things that we wanted to do with the Patreon was to, I guess, kind of acknowledge or honor the people that are listening and supporting. And so we have a shout out for a new member.
Our first shout out.
Yes. So, Malin, do our shout out for our first new member.
So we want to say thank you very, very, very much to our first Patreon supporter, and that is Madison. Madison, we could not be doing this without you. You are an integral part of our process and our ability to reach new people and create even more content. And we just want to say thank you very much. It means more to us than we can probably tell you, even in a little shout out here on our podcast. So Madison, if you're listening, which we know you are, Thank you very much.
We appreciate you, Madison. Thanks so much. We appreciate your support. It's been good.
You can also find us on the patreon.com/or/roundtable mindset. And then, of course, we will include a link in all of our show notes. But we do not plan on having this be a regular conversation, just wanting to make sure everybody knows that it's out there. And if you're interested and want to take a look. And again, thank you for at least considering.
Yes. The best way to support our page, though, is always to like, follow, and share, right? Like, isn't that what they say on all the YouTube videos? Like, follow, and share.
That's the blood. That's the backbone.
Yes. But anyway, so all things Patreon aside, we have kind of I don't know. I feel like this has been a topic that we've been stewing over for a while.
I think we didn't, well, at least I'm going to speak for myself. I didn't recognize it. So today's is going to be like a twofer. So we really are not going to have a separate food for thought, but we're going to blend the two together because this topic has roots back in, and for me, it has roots back in, if you go listen to the assisted suicide episode that we've done, it's been a while ago. There was a comment in there that maybe that was the seed that got planted around the topic of social invisibility that we're going to touch on today. And just to take a little bit of a personal note, where this really took traction for me is I was out to dinner with my wife and we were having a really great time and a good conversation. And we were talking about just the area around us and the people and some of our friends and, just having a normal conversation. And then I noticed and I kind of looked around, and where I live it's not huge. I mean, it's a big metropolitan area, but it's not like hundreds of millions of people. And we've been there for almost 19 years. And I just remember mentioning to my wife, I said, I've been in the heart of the city for so long, and I've worked in some of the main businesses and corporations of the city, and I don't recognize a single person here. And our conversation continued. And then I came back and I said, but do they know that we're here? Like, we're in a sea of people having dinner. They might see us, but do they really see us? Like, are we recognizable? Like, are we just, and this is where the term came from, or are we kind of like living ghosts where nobody's really even paying attention to us? And that's where I really started sinking my teeth into this concept. And I wanted to know more about it, and if there was more than just me affected. Was this something internally that I was feeling, or is there really a bigger like social impact to this type of feeling, whatever this was? And we found some stuff, and I'm excited to share that. So yeah, today's episode, and I guess food for thought, it's all wrapped up into one, which is social invisibility. I'm kind of excited because there's some things in here that I wasn't expecting, and the size of this is a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Well, and when you brought that up, I was like, first I thought we were talking about Sixth Sense, I see dead people kind of thing, but it made me really pause and think about the people around me and where is this happening around me that I'm not recognizing. And so I'm kind of excited to see your research. I use the word research loosely. I think your deep dive in learning and things like that. And I have some too, so I'm excited to jump into. So where shall we start?
Well, I think we've been successful in the past, just to kind of level set on this. I did put together a thought. I'm not going to call it a definition, but just to kind of see where I was going and starting to connect these dots from, that dinner conversation I had with my wife all up into this conversation. I was able to, look at articles. I went across, this time I went across a lot of social media, as well as I did some deep diving into some articles and authors and books. So I feel like I have a nice, well-rounded understanding of the impact. Do I say I have a good understanding of how all of this is intricately worked and woven into people's lives? No, but I think I have a better idea of what I was trying to say, even when you and I were talking and you thought I was talking about actually seeing dead people. So I would like to start off there. I think, so here's kind of what I put together. What we're talking about today is the inability to be seen, or the state of being ignored or not taken into consideration. Social invisibility refers to individuals in society who have been separated or systematically ignored by most of the public. As a result, these individuals are marginalized, feel neglected. It can include elderly homes, child orphanages, homeless people, or anyone who experiences a sense of being ignored or separated from society. I kind of landed there because, again, as I was going through all of these things that I was looking at, and I was pulling pieces together, right? I really left in there the examples of the elderly homes, child orphanages, and homeless, because in a lot of the things that I was looking at, they weren't even mentioned, or they were mentioned specifically to be ignored or not to be really focused on, which I thought was horrible. And I'm not above that. Like, I do the same thing, but I don't want to get into all of that because we'll keep diving in. But that's kind of, as I put my thoughts together, that's in a nutshell what I really would like to, crack open and dig in a little bit deeper.
On a surface level, those were kind of the people I was thinking of, specifically like homeless people. We don't have a huge homeless population in the city that I live in, but we do have a few. And I know that I have walked past and not really, like, I notice and then I just go about my day. You know what I mean? So that's definitely where my brain went first. What was interesting to me as I continued to think through this topic and just reflect and process is how often that must happen to even people who are not part of those marginalized communities. You know what I mean? And how often I have felt that way. So I think it's easy to jump on that and just assume you know what it is. But I love that there are so many layers to this to consider. And all of it really kind of takes most of the focus off of myself and makes me start looking outward. You know what I mean? So.
Well, and that's I feel like this a lot of times in different situations, and it kind of ebbs and flows with me, right? Like, there's some times where, and we've talked about this too a little bit, in my personal life, this is where I kind of feel it. And there's times and situations where I'm so busy with family and friends, or I'm actually out doing things, or, we have one dinner party here and followed by a birthday party here, or followed by another event, child's activities. And so you sometimes stay so busy, you don't have those feelings creep in because you don't feel invisible. And for me, there's times when there's that quiet space where it feels like I can't even get on people's radars. Like, as much as I try, the phone doesn't ring. I don't get text messages. Suddenly there's no activities to go to. And I feel like the world is just spinning and leaving me behind. And then that kind of ends. And so some of the stuff that, I was thinking about is this me? So, making it internalized. And then I went the other way and said, well, is society doing this to me? Like, am I saying or doing something where it's easy to forget who I am, or that I'm not important enough? And so that internal struggle, which that I thought I was honestly alone. And that's what I loved about all of the stuff that we're talking about. Is it's bigger than me. I'm not the only one affected by this. And truthfully, even when I feel like I'm invisible, I'm not alone in that. There are people all across this country who feel the exact same way. And as much as that's terrible for them, I can't lie to you, I was relieved. I was like, okay, so I'm experiencing this, but I don't want to say it's normal, but other people are too. And so it just pushed me more, Jamie, to say there is something here that I want to identify. And do I think that we're bringing, we're shaking the earth here and we're bringing a whole new concept? No, but I think it really brought to my attention things that I can do, like you said, looking outward from my own nose and maybe not making it all about me, but also recognizing what I can do for myself when I feel like that in those situations. And I don't feel like it's happening to me. I feel like now I have a better understanding of things to look for, and I probably will be able to navigate those waters a little bit better.
Well, and actually, you just kind of touched on one of the things that I felt that was one of the more interesting pieces of this topic specifically. I felt like there's kind of a dichotomy involved in this, right? Like, there's times where I do this to myself, and there's times where it's done to me, and there's times where I do this to other people, and there's times where other people are doing that to themselves. You know what I mean? It's like this, it's almost like there's two ends of this. And sometimes I think when I've done it to myself, it's by choice. sometimes. Sometimes I just need to withdraw, and I need to have that space or those boundaries in order for me to either, I don't know, heal, shore up, I don't know, whatever the case might be. I can think of several times that has been that way for me. But there's also times where I have felt like I was trying to connect and wasn't able to for some reason. And so I think that's an interesting piece of this too, is how, sometimes it's done to us and sometimes we do it.
Yeah. And, I love all the interactions that we get on our socials. And I posed this question out on our page just to kind of start getting some other people's perspectives and opinions. And we have several podcasters that we interact with, and our podcasting community is growing, and really enjoying having them as kind of a support system, as we're going through this. And one of the podcasters, they're called Ouch, Was That a Ghost? They actually even did a comment on here. We're not going to be able to do it justice by any means, but I thought it was worth at least mentioning, especially now when we're in here, talking about the differences between introverts and extroverts. And again, I'm not going to be able to do it justice. There's another podcast that I listen to that has to do with introverts. And it's a really, I'm going to segue here for just a second. It is a really great listen. And as someone first of all, the podcast name is called Stay Introverted. It is really great, but it's teaching me a lot of things about an introvert's life and kind of what they go through and the struggles they have on the day to day. I'm actively looking for an extrovert one because I find myself to be more on the extrovert side, I believe. So I'd kind of like to see the counterbalance to that. But anyways, back to Ouch, Was That a Ghost comment? There's a difference there. And I think that has to be at least acknowledged. I don't think I will be able to do it much justice in just this conversation. But I've heard, and after listening, that some introverts withdraw in order to charge their batteries. And so I'm speculating here, but I could understand where that social invisibility may be starting off as in a place where you want it and need it. But I can see left unchecked how that may turn into, well, now I don't want to be invisible anymore. How do I stop this from continuing? And from an extrovert, speaking for myself, maybe I'm seeing this a lot more because I don't want to withdraw to recharge my batteries. I like spending time with people. And that's what charges my batteries. And when that's not there, I miss it almost immediately. So I just want to take a little segue since you were talking about that and give a little context, because I do think if you're an introvert or an extrovert, that does play a big role into this, or at least it can.
Well, and I do think a counselor that I worked with, her and I were talking once about my kids, essentially. And I feel like I have one of each. I have an introvert and I have an extrovert, right? So I have one who really does need that connection, continuous connection. And my son is more of an introvert, and he really does need that time away to be able to recharge. And I don't know that I really understood that. And so there was a learning process for me to give him that space, to allow him that time to step away and really recharge. But the one thing that my counselor friend told me is always remember that people are made for connection. Introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter. They still need connection. And I think that is, for me, that's kind of the crux of this whole topic is, what am I doing? What am I doing to have connection? And what am I doing to make connection with people who need connection? You know what I mean? Because I think that sense of community is so important for our mental health and our well-being. So that's, it's just something that has always stuck with me, that, we as human beings are made for connection. And so this can be really detrimental too. Did you do research about what some of the harmful effects might be of this?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different harmful effects that this can come from. But for me, I just want to take just another second and kind of recognize a couple different things. Because one of the things, I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel like, where does this come from? How do we get into a place where this social invisibility, first of all, I keep using it like it's a term I've known forever. Like, I just learned this. I had no idea what you even called it. And I stumbled across this term of social invisibility, which fits nicely. But just so you know, like I'm throwing this around like it's an old hat. It's brand new. Like I just discovered this not too long ago. So there's that.
That there's a name for it, right?
There's a name. Yeah. First of all, this is something that has a name, and a lot of people I don't suffer or go through this. It was crazy to me. But to start touching on your question, for me, I wanted to understand, there's a lot of harmful effects, but where does this all begin from? Like what could be some external or internal influences that can start making either people look for that invisibility, or maybe that invisibility happens to them, or, and this is another option, the person is the one that's driving that invisibility. However, they're doing things that they're not even aware of because of some of the things I'm going to get into. And that was an aha moment for me, because I was looking for, what are my actions that are causing people to put me in this, I'll say, surround me with this invisibility, or what am I doing? I was looking for those direct examples, and I found a couple. But I also think when you read through this and we keep talking, you're going to see that there's some things that maybe happen to us as we're growing up, or environmental, that we're not even consciously aware that we're doing, but we're acting in that way. We're almost inviting that invisibility to come in because of a variety of different things. And again, this is my own personal opinion on this, but I'll stop rambling and just get into it. But I thought that was really interesting, that it was also almost an unconscious thing that people were doing that maybe was feeding that invisibility. Mm-hmm. So I broke this down. Oh, did you want to say something?
No, I agree.
Okay. For sure. No, I'm just kidding. So I broke this down into external and internal. And so some of these, I don't think I just want to preface this, that I don't think this is an absolute list. I don't think this applies across the board. I don't know if some people would experience any of these on the list. It was just a good way to put my mind around it. So here we go. As part of the external forces, childhood emotional neglect or abuse. I've been finding that in the stuff that I've been going through, that seems to have a pretty big indicator. I'm going to lump in here also children of narcissistic parents. There was one piece of it that I found that as a narcissist, if they're a narcissist as a parent, behavior is about making themselves look bigger and more important while diminishing the people around you. So if you think about it, it's not a very hard connection to make, that if you're a child of a narcissist, you've probably seen your whole life growing up being in the shadow of this parent and actually being made to feel smaller so they can feel bigger. Mm-hmm. And so if you have that relationship going on, even if the child sees it as being normal, they're being trained to minimize themselves, even if they don't think they are. And again, not in every situation, but I thought that was an interesting little nod, because it kind of does make sense. If you're constantly trying to or being told explicitly or not to be smaller so I can look bigger, over time, that has to just become second nature, I would think.
That's really interesting. And I hadn't thought of that, about like family systems and how that plays out in that way. Because you even think about kids in a family, and if you have, the oldest, the middle, and the youngest, right? And the youngest is look at me, and the middle is like, just leave me alone. You know what I mean? Like, I hadn't even thought of family structure and things like that as training tools. And I should have, because it makes sense on how much of an impact that has. I also might lump in there, and hopefully this isn't down on your list, but like codependency is another thing that might help those people pleasers. You know what I mean? Like, that might be another indicator of this sort of thing, that I'm going to step back because you need this, and sacrificing myself for someone, to further someone else might also play into that too. So I hadn't thought of that. That's a good one.
Yeah, no. And you touched on the other one, which is that those relationships where you have those codependent people and situations. So no, you touched on that one. Another one that I'm lumping into this external is when you either live a lifestyle or you maybe have to do actions that you're not proud of, you withdraw naturally. So I think there's, I call it shame. I don't know if that's only exclusive to shame, but that's kind of what I'm lumping it in underneath. So when you have the shame that's about you, you don't want people who may be the ones that can help you the most or be around you the most. You try to start isolating or removing yourself because of those conversations or maybe those feelings that you have of what you're doing or what you have done in the past. And you just want to avoid that. That was another one that I kind of came across that I never really thought about either. Are there some actions in my life? Are there people that I'm avoiding because maybe I didn't treat them the nicest? Maybe they don't agree with my lifestyle. Maybe I hurt them in the past, and so now it's just easier to avoid. Well, you do that avoidance enough, and pretty soon you're withdrawing from a lot of different people, and maybe that's where that invisibility starts coming out, because now when I'm using that as, I'm air quoting, a shield to protect me, suddenly it becomes almost a locked prison that I can't get out of. And that would be really terrible.
Sorry, that one just kind of hit me because we didn't really talk about a lot of these beforehand. So I wasn't expecting that one, but that's kind of, I have an experience like that where, I don't know how to frame it, I guess. Several years ago, there was an event. We were in our, my ex and I were in our Sunday school class together, and we were not doing super great. We were really not getting along very well. And it kind of bubbled to the surface in the middle of our Sunday school class, right? And I ended up getting up and walking away because I was so frustrated. And going back to that class, I only went a couple more times after that. And eventually, I think the embarrassment of that, the kind of the shame of what happened that day, it caused me to feel disconnection with the group. And that really was kind of a start for a lot of, I don't know, I guess I never felt like it was self-isolation though. So I'm being kind of reflective here. I'm like, wait a minute. Was that me? I think that was my own feelings that was keeping me from reconnecting to that group. But for some reason, I never saw it that way. It was like, oh, we just drifted apart. Like I didn't ever feel like they were shunning me or anything like that. But it definitely caused, like it drove disconnection. And I never looked at it as something that I had done. So that's a really, apparently this is a therapy session today. So
I will send you my bill when I'm done. No, again, it's, I want to recognize what you're saying, because I might not feel the exact same way, but there are so many times in my life where this comes out where I feel like there's nobody that's really there listening. There's really nobody there that notices me or sees me. And it's a tough spot to put in, regardless of how you get there. I think just that when we're there, it's just tough. And for me, all of this has really helped, just knowing that, other people are going through this doesn't make me feel like I'm alone. And I really was making it personalized to what is wrong with me? What did I do? How can I change? Like, you really try to find all these things that I try to find all these things that I'm doing. How do I stop doing? Or are there things I need to be doing, and how do I start them? And how do I make those connections? And so just even hearing you kind of bring these examples, it's just really helpful. So it's a therapy session for both of us.
Well, and the interesting thing is that it doesn't always have to be like injury, right? That's kind of the interesting part about what you're saying, is that it's like, I don't have to have done something wrong necessarily. I mean, yeah, that could be a thing, but the other person may not have experienced anything like that. They weren't injured in any way, but we feel that way. You know what I mean? It's interesting to think about how we can get to these spaces and not even realize that we're in these spaces, and how we got there, or how we got ourselves there. So
I agree. And I want to touch on some of these other, what I've listed underneath external. This is a hot button one, but prejudice or just not being accepted for a variety of reasons is another external. People look at how you look. So again, you see a homeless person, or maybe even you see somebody who appears to be homeless. That appearance alone could be enough that people could be wanting to avoid them, and maybe they need a connection and nobody's approaching them because of how they look. Another one is how people believe or worship is another external factor that some people will not talk to or they will retreat from. Racial or gender stereotypes, and we're seeing that a lot in a lot of conversations in a lot of places. But those are also other examples of external items that may be keeping people from making those connections or be feeling like they're invisible. So I'm sure there's a lot more, but I just kind of wanted to touch on some of those external reasons or why some people might be feeling like they're invisible. I do have a list if you're curious, because I like examples. And so as I was going through, I was like, okay, how does this look in practice, right? Like, what would this look like? I have my experiences, you have your experiences, but I wanted to see if there was any other people. And so this is coming again from articles and blogs, what some people are saying. And so here are some individuals' examples of how they were feeling maybe this social invisibility. One of which, and this was from a TikToker, said a child who raises their hand but is never called on. This TikToker stated that they were in college, a professor was taking attendance, they raised their hand, but they were counted absent. So they were feeling very unseen. And in a situation where it was the professor was going around to every individual taking attendance, yet this person was not counted. They were feeling very invisible at that time. Another story comes from a person was standing in line and she was next in line and the person behind her was waited on before she was. And I know some of these sound kind of small and insignificant, but if you keep having these feelings and these situations happen over and over again, they just compound. Somebody else came and said, I post on social media. Some people can, put a post out there that gets tons of responses. But when I put the exact same content out there, it gets ignored or I'm just told to get over it.
Yeah.
So even when you compare yourself and your interactions that you're putting even on social media, some people can see other successes. And I'm raising my hand because I'm guilty too. And then I put something out there that doesn't get as much traction or doesn't get as much attention. And it drives me nuts. Like it starts making me feel like, what's wrong with me? Is this mic on? Can people hear me?
Well, it's because you need a puppy, Malin. I mean, we've discovered that puppy content is the key for interaction, right?
I'm not going to go through all of these, but just want to touch on just like one or two more. A man of color flagging a cab down and nobody stops could be seen as that person could be feeling like they are invisible. And then a person using food stamps at the local grocer, there may be times when people don't recognize them or approach them, or there's a stereotype or a stigma that comes around them. And so then people maybe don't approach like they would somebody who's not using those types of items. But the real main point to all of this was just a selection of different events that people were recounting across blogs, social media. I mentioned TikTok. And what I thought was really interesting is as I was going through collecting these, it was one story after another from a variety of different lenses, a variety of different circumstances. But the constant here was so many people are feeling this and so many people are going through it. It was kind of, I felt a little bit sad for everybody, including myself. But then at the same time, I was almost like validated and was like, okay, there is something here. Like, it's not just in my mind. It's not just my imagination. It's not just my personality, although it may have a factor and all, every one of those might have a factor, but it's not something that is just specific to me. This is affecting a lot of people.
Well, it definitely does feel like a pretty universal experience in one way or another. I think we've all experienced that somewhere. You know what I mean? So I do feel like it's just a matter of whether we recognize it or not, I think.
Yeah. Really quick, I have some examples of family dynamics. So we touched on them. So just to give you the ones that I found, some people were reporting that when they married outside of their race or religion, their family pretty much isolated them, or they were feeling like they became invisible to their family structure. So maybe in a social setting, they were fine, but the family dynamics shifted or completely isolated them or made them feel invisible. Something as silly as there was somebody who said, I chose to go a different path in my education and my career, and I didn't join the family business. And because of that, my family doesn't talk to me and they avoid me. I can't imagine that one, but that would be kind of rough.
Yeah.
Then get out of the family dynamics and go to the workplace. Because again, I try to poke in all the places, right? Because I spend the majority of my time in the workplace. So I wanted to know, and I've experienced this before. I mean, it's not as profound, I don't think, for me as some of the other situations we talked about. But being excluded from conversations. So I've been in meetings where, or I should say, I've seen meetings take place where I'm not part of them, and I should have been, and I was never invited. And not being part of a presentation. I think I've spoken. There was a gentleman I used to work with where we did not get along, and there was a presentation that we both worked on, and then he scheduled the presentation and did not include me, and I didn't know that it was taking place. And yes, I had a different reaction than feeling like I was socially invisible. There was a lot of anger, but if you boil it down, that's an example, or that's another symptom of either someone trying to do that to you, or maybe you're falling into it. Even if I would have internalized that and felt like I didn't have a voice, or I felt like I was being invisible, but that happens. And I think that happens a lot more to people than people want to realize, I guess.
Yeah.
I have two more things on this topic. I just wanted to touch on that. What makes this really hurtful, in my opinion, and different than just being ignored, I guess, is that on some level, I recognize that my existence is being overlooked in some way. And so it goes beyond just not being seen. It starts going into like I'm feeling rejected or I'm insignificant. So I just wanted to call that out, is that the social invisibility isn't just about I'm being ignored. It's about, and how I feel when this happens to me is people see me, kind of like if you go back to my analogy at the dinner, I'm in a sea of people, I'm in a restaurant, people see me, but I just don't feel significant, or I feel overlooked, right? And so if I was not actually being seen, I think that would be a lot easier for me to stomach than knowing I'm being noticed, but I'm almost being rejected, if that makes sense.
Well, and actually it almost sounds like a feeling of not having value, that you're not valued as a person, or your contributions aren't valued. And that takes me back to Grey's Anatomy. Pick me, choose me, love me. That was a huge thing. Well, and the reason that stuck out for me so much is because I did a training to facilitate a parenting class that really is all about connection. It's all about attachment and things like that. And that was one of the pieces of that training, was pick me, choose me, love me. That the messages our kids are giving us is to pick me, choose me, love me. And how that is not just about our kids. That's really about us. That's how we feel connected, is that once we have someone who picks us and chooses us and loves us and shows us value, that's how we start building community, and that's how we thrive as people. And so, the examples that you're giving, really, it's not just about being ignored. It's about being dismissed. It's about not having a space at the table where you are valued and cared for. And I don't know if, what always makes me curious about these things is it that I'm more mature and can recognize that differently than I did, or is this more prevalent? You know what I mean? Like, is this becoming worse, or is this something that I'm just noticing because my brain's now in a space where I can notice it? And so that's something that always makes me curious too. Is this something that's like an epidemic that's happening, or are you and I just stumbling upon this, and this has been how it is for forever?
Yeah, well, these articles that I've been pulling from, I think one of them went back to like 2011. So maybe it's something that's just starting to get more visibility and it's always been there. I did stumble across, and I kick myself because I'm going off of memory now, but there's something called like the disappearing woman syndrome or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And it talks about, and I tried to go back and find it, and I couldn't find the article again. But it talked about, as I go off memory, there's something that happens between a woman's life between age 41 and like 53. It was a weird range. And it said where you don't see a lot of the, women of that age on television or commercials in business settings or corporate settings. They're the ones that are kind of overlooked at that time. And then for some strange reason, around like 51, 52, they almost come back into society. And so I thought that was really interesting, and I wish I would have had time to go find it, but I just wanted to kind of call that out a little bit, that I think there are these cycles for, genders or different races, or maybe even religions. I don't know. But it seems like for this one, there's a time period where a woman in a social setting is noticed and engaged, and all of a sudden they just evaporate or not represented until later in life, and then they almost kind of come back into society, which I thought that was really weird. And so I've started paying attention now, because I'm like, I want to know, like, what age do I see a lot of women?
Just admit it. You want to prove it wrong.
Oh, a little bit, but let's be honest. I do that all the time. Okay, so no, I to answer your question, I think it's been there. I just think people maybe are paying attention a little bit more than they used to be. That's my 2 cents. I want to round out this little conversation that we're having right now about external, internal. We've touched on a lot of the internal ones. The last one that I had, or I guess the last two that I just want to mention, is shyness. So shyness is one that could be that you do, that could be part of your personality. That could be if you're an introvert, whatever. Social situations could cause shyness. I've mentioned before that if I go into a room full of people that I don't know, my first reaction is I withdraw. I kind of minimize myself because I'm trying to get the lay of the land. And then once I get comfortable, I let my personality out. But that shyness, it generally is talking about it. You find it difficult to open up to new people. You might wait for others to make the first move. So that if that's kind of the personality you have, I could see how that could be feeding into this. Well, I'm feeling invisible because you have that shyness. The last little thing I'm going to make a little note on all of this is invisibility. I found this little quote and I thought it was good. Invisibility might feel empowering at times since it can create a sense of safety. But when you long to connect with people who treat you as someone of worth, lingering feelings of invisibility can leave you feeling unfulfilled. So I think with the best of intentions, people withdraw and they like that invisibility because it gives you, I just gave a good example for myself. I put that invisibility on or withdraw in a group of people that I don't know because I'm safeguarding myself until I feel comfortable enough that they can see me or, handle my personality. It is a safety mechanism. And then I open up. But if you just stay in that space, I could see how you feel unfulfilled. What a terrible feeling.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's almost, it kind of makes me think of like diet culture, like, too much of a good thing, is it a bad thing? Well, we've even talked about that, right? Yep. Like, is there too much of a good thing? Or, but like moderation is key. And I think that even people who thrive on connection with other people, there's some benefit to be able to draw back and find quiet spaces to yourself. And people who have their batteries recharged by being by themselves, I feel like there is value in that connection, and having a good balance of both is super important to be well, I think. So,
well, I want to touch on because I know you know me, Jamie, but my mind goes to, I want to know what kind of effects this can have. So I think you asked me early on, what are some of the effects?
Yeah.
So now this is a very long way of getting to the answering your question you asked me 30 minutes ago. I found two different causes two different effects that invisibility cause. There's the emotional and the physical. So I'm going to go through the emotional first. Invisibility can cause anger, stress, anxiety, hopelessness, depression, chronic mental illness, and I kind of want to crack that one open because if I have to pick one that I'm kind of pushing on, this one doesn't make sense. So maybe it makes sense to you a little bit more than me, Jamie, but I was kind of surprised they lumped that in there. And the last one, substance abuse. And if you were feeling some of these other things up above, especially hopelessness and depression, I could almost see where it's a getaway, right? I don't want to feel these emotions anymore. So I'm going to take this drug or whatever it is to escape these feelings. So I kind of see that one. I don't know if you have any other ones that you found or want to touch on, but I'm really curious on what you think about the chronic mental illness.
Well, I guess that doesn't surprise me. I mean, chronic being repetitious, right? Or ongoing. I think what's interesting is that they list anxiety and depression separately, because I feel like if I look back for myself, those are probably the two things that affected me the most when I was feeling social isolation, right? Or social invisibility, either because I caused it or because I chose it, right? So I feel like those, when I feel isolated, when I am feeling invisible, then I feel lonely. I feel detached. I feel like I don't have connections that are meaningful. And so those two things make sense to me. And I don't know if there would be other conditions that would be caused by that. But I do feel like the longer that you're in those spaces, like if I'm depressed and I continue to be depressed and continue to be depressed, I do think that kind of changes the way that our body adjusts and deals with those chemicals and things like that cause long-term or chronic depression. I'm no doctor. This is not medical opinion. This is just personal experience.
However, you have watched every episode of Grey's Anatomy, so is that the same?
I could be. No. But I feel like those times when I've been in that cycle of sadness, the longer I stay there, the harder it is to get out. And it's like those natural abilities that my brain has to balance out the chemicals to help me not be depressed. It changes the way that my body responds to that, I think. And so it's harder for my body to kickstart itself out too. So I think that when you mention chronic mental illness, those are the kind of things that I think of. And, it would be no surprise to me that this kind of environment might also cause an increase in suicidal ideation and, possibilities for things like that too. I think if you have a propensity for other mental health conditions, being isolated and alone and being stuck with those thoughts could cause those to get worse too. So I think that there is a key factor. I think a key factor in our mental health is being able to anchor outside of ourselves, being able to connect to other people, because that gives us like a reflection, right? So if I say or do something that is socially unacceptable, then I get feedback from that. And so then that helps me adjust and learn about my environment. And if I don't get that feedback and I'm just stuck, then my mind can go all kinds of places with that. And so I could see how that might lead to someone who is predispositioned for psychosis to go into psychosis because they're stuck with those thoughts and there's no reflection of reality back and things like that. So it's not a far stretch for me, I guess, is the long way to say that.
No, I'm glad that you said all that, because that's a lot for me to kind of take in and absorb. When I just read that at face value, I'm like, okay, I couldn't see the connection. I'm just going to leave it there. So you helped quite a bit. So thank you for that. And I never would have thought, I didn't even put on there that suicide ideation. I didn't even have that on my radar, but I'm sure you're right. Like if you're willing to take, drugs to help you escape, I'm sure if it gets bad enough that's not a small leap. Moving over to the physical the physical side of invisibility. I thought this was interesting. Your brain responds to social rejection, which in this case would be a form of social invisibility, in the same way it responds to physical pain. So to your brain, there's no difference.
Oh, well, wow. Wait a minute, that shouldn't be a surprise, I guess. Like emotional pain. Well, because emotional pain can be physical sometimes, right? I mean, you think about heartbreak, or you think, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
I just guess I never would have stopped and thought my brain's processing the social invisibility the same way as if somebody just came up and smacked me in the arm, like bam, ow.
yeah.
But it impacts the brain's nervous system, is what it said, what the article was saying. It can put stress on the heart, which I don't think there's any surprise there. It can cause stomach issues. And I'm sure because of the stomach issues, it can lead to liver problems. So, and I'm sure this is not, and I keep saying this like I sound like beating a dead horse here, but it's not all inclusive, I'm sure. But these were the ones that I just pulled out because I thought, man, if you had physical effects of being socially invisible, like what would they look like? And these were the ones I was pulling from. So that is the majority of the things kind of teeing up what this is. I know we've spent a lot of time kind of talking through this. It's been really great. But one of the sections I'd like to get to as we start maybe coming to a conclusion is how do you overcome this? How do we recognize this? And how do we start maybe doing things to overcome this social invisibility? And I am very interested to hear, Jamie, all the things that you found when you were doing your research, specifically around how you kind of come out of this. Do you mind sharing?
Absolutely. And what was interesting is how, when we were kind of comparing notes slightly ahead of this, how we found some similar things. And, I specifically was looking at and searching for how do I overcome this, right? So, and that was probably where I started seeing that dichotomy, that am I doing this to someone or am I doing this to myself? Is this being done to me or am I doing it to myself? And so I found two different perspectives, I guess, in looking at how to help with this, right? One of them is how do I help someone else who's struggling with social isolation or social invisibility? And that was that's where my brain automatically went. Like, oh, I'm good. How do I help someone else, right? Because this is my nature, I think, and my work, really. But some of the things that you can do, if you notice that someone is socially isolating, is determine whether they want or need help. We kind of go back to that. Are they an introvert? Do they need that time to recharge? And are we just missing that piece of it? But even before that, it's really just about noticing that someone might be feeling invisible, or noticing that they're being dismissed or overlooked. And that's kind of the big thing. And I loved this little tip in this article that I read. That was ask them. Ask first, right? Like get consent.
Well, and just to add to that, again, going back to the post that we put on our social media on Facebook, we have somebody who responded to us on that, and they come from, his name is Jim, and he comes from Real Men Hug podcast. So it's one that I've kind of,
that's a good one.
It is. It's a really good one. And Jim left us a statement on there where he knew a kid in high school. And the kid wasn't very, popular. He was probably in that social invisibility camp. And Jim goes on to saying that this kid was standing outside of the cafeteria. Everyone was just walking right past him, which Jim noticed. And so Jim stopped and said something like, hey, what's up? Then gave the kid's name. And the kid responded to him and said, do you ever just feel like a piece of furniture? And I thought that was so telling. Like, first of all, that Jim did exactly what we're talking about. If you see something and you see somebody that's maybe in that, go and ask them, go have a conversation with them. But we get a little bit of an insight into this other kid's, perspective, which is he was feeling just like an inanimate object that people were just walking by. How terrible. But I just wanted to share that story because I think it fits so nicely into what you're even talking about and describing, Jamie. I just wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things, I guess, after we've determined that the person is needing or wanting our help, because we can't always help if they don't want the help, right? The next thing that they kind of talked about was just encouraging them to socialize by starting like with some one-on-one time, inviting to social events. It was really reminiscent of some of the anti-bullying material that my kids had in, like, when they were in school, is, you can sit with us, right? That was a big thing for a while. And, just it being inclusive and inviting them into those social spaces, supporting their interests, if they really enjoy coffee, going to coffee, that kind of thing. And then also like encouraging other people to socialize with them. So, starting with one-on-one time and then maybe bringing them into your group, your friend group, if you've got that. And then just encouraging them not to give up, not to assume, because I think when you sit in that space long enough, it's easy to interpret things that are happening in those situations as, see, here it goes again. It's just more of the same. And so, encouraging them to keep trying is important. Boosting self-esteem, really helping them see their good qualities, list their good qualities, telling them how much you appreciate them and how much you value them. That is a big boost for self-esteem. This was my favorite tip though, Malin. This article was in like Psych Today or, like Psychology Now, or I don't know, something like that. But the tip is to help them update their image, like a makeover.
Well, but if you think about it, there's some psychological effects. I mean, I remember when I've gone and got a really good haircut, I just walk a little taller, I don't mind looking in the mirror every once in a while. So I can see some validity to that. Am I shocked that it was in that kind of an article? Absolutely. Yeah. But I can see it. It has merit.
This wasn't Look magazine. This was, it just kind of made me giggle, but you're absolutely right. I have experienced the exact same thing. If I am not doing okay and I go get a good haircut or some new lipstick or something, it makes me feel like $1 million. So it's good. But it also encourages us to help them like practice social situations. If we practice those things together, that can help boost their confidence and self-esteem. And I think that's a big piece of, especially for me, when I've been in those places where I feel socially invisible because it's sometimes it's mindset for me. Sometimes it's my perspective that I'm not valued, which makes me feel less valuable, right? And then the last one is really to address problems that lead to isolation. So those things that we were talking about, like, seeking help for substance abuse, if that is that shame that comes from that, encouraging treatment for mental health challenges, if there's, anxiety and depression present, to make sure that we're helping them gain access to services, helping them find, resources to deal with abuse or trauma, domestic violence, that kind of thing. And then another piece, and this kind of just solidified the connection for me between what we're trying to teach our kids with all of the anti-bullying thing that is happening in schools, is really to stand up to bullying. If you see a person who is being marginalized socially, to stand up to that and help them see that, I recognize this and I value you, and I'm not going to let this other person devalue you. That can really bolster a person's self-esteem. So those are things that we can do if we see someone who is struggling with that social invisibility. Did you find anything, additional to that? Because I do feel like we kind of went down some similar pathways. But
we did. I think the ones that I have here are more around things that a person who is experiencing the social invisibility can do for themselves. So I loved your list of what we can do looking for other people. So my list has to do with what people can do for themselves.
Well, and we did hit on a lot of those things. Like when I feel like I've been dismissed or I'm not valued, what do I do about that? Like, how do I take steps for myself? And I think that we've talked a lot about like recognizing what's causing that. Why am I feeling that in this space? What is it that's the barrier? Is it that I'm being marginalized or bullied? Is it that, I'm just shy? What are those things? And I think a big piece of that too, one of those things that I felt like was important to add to my little list here of the stuff that you covered for the most part was just perspective and reminding myself that, okay, is this what's actually happening, or is this how I'm feeling that this is happening? And understanding that maybe I'm looking at the situation in a way that makes me feel invisible, but maybe that's not the intention of the group, or that's not the intention of the person that I'm feeling that way from. Does that make sense?
It does. And what a great segue, because you just basically touched on the one thing that I wanted a couple of things I wanted to touch on, or what I wanted to say, but you've teed it up so nicely, which is set clear boundaries. If you are one that you're experiencing these social invisibility, when I say set up clear boundaries, what I'm talking about is, sometimes your friends, family, loved ones, whoever, they don't know they're overlooking you. So it's done so, and it's not intentional, right? It's intentional. Maybe they're busy with their own lives. And so some things that I found that would be kind of helpful is there's something called assertive communication, which it does, it makes sense. I never really put the two and two together.
Well, that might be because I think you naturally are an assertive communicator. I think that this is probably why you were like, oh, that has a name.
I'm like, I call that Tuesday. What do you call it? Okay. No, assertive communication. And this is just to keep us all on the same page, is plainly, it's just stating your thoughts and feelings. So it allows you to advocate for yourself for your personal needs, and reminds others that your voice matters. So I kind of summarize that to speak up for yourself, right? Like, make sure people know you're there. The other thing that I thought was really great is there were a couple of questions, examples that you can do for your friends versus like maybe a partner. So one of the examples they gave was, to your friends, you might say something like, I feel hurt and lonely when you get together without including me. I'd love an invite next time. So just kind of calling out the fact that, hey, I recognize that you've gone out. I just want you to know that I really want to be part of that. And I'm not going to go into it too much, but part of what this stems from is sometimes there's people that say no a lot. And so if you're in a situation, maybe you have children or you have a new partner, or work's really involved and they've been asking you and you've been saying no, 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 they may stop asking you because they're just assumed, well, you're just so busy. Well, that's where that invisibility could start coming in. So just make sure you remind people, hey, I would love to come and I miss hanging out with you. For a partner, I thought it was great as their example was, I feel frustrated when you ignore my messages and calls for days. I need regular communication in a relationship, so I'd like to hear back from you within a day in the future. I get the premise of that, but some of that is a little odd to me. Like my wife sends me something, I don't think she would really enjoy or respect the fact that I waited a whole day, but I get the point, right? Like, you're just communicating, saying, I'm sending you something, I need something back. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So I just wanted to touch on those, Jamie. I don't know if you have anything else, but I thought that was kind of cool. Just some little examples of what we might be able to do in that assertive communication when we were feeling that way.
Well, and I do think an example or a thought that I had that really wasn't included in any of the research that I did was, really just saying something, talking about how you're feeling with another person can help you gain that perspective to say, I don't know I don't think Sheila's not like that. She wouldn't treat you like that on purpose. You know what I mean? And if you aren't able to talk to someone about it, I think it's really important to make those connections. If it's not someone around you that you can connect with socially, then, just finding a professional therapist or counselor or life coach or something, because I can easily tell you there are spaces in my life where I really did feel that this was happening to me, but it wasn't. It really was because of my own. It wasn't because I wasn't being valued by others. It's because I wasn't valuing myself, and that I didn't give myself credit for what I brought to the table. And so I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have someone to reflect back that to me.
Well, the last thing that I have on my list, Jamie, that I'd like to just leave with is I like to bring different perspectives, and I know you do too. And during my research investigation, I came across a blog, and the author of this blog is by the name of Ryan Gordon. So Ryan, if by chance you were listening, I appreciate your thoughts on your blog. I am reading just an excerpt because I think it's really powerful to kind of get somebody's real life example of what they're going through or how they're feeling like they're going through the social invisibility. So I am going to read this just because I think it was just so powerful. So his blog was around answering a question about social invisibility that was being asked. His response was, it feels truly horrible. Unimaginably yet deeply horrible, a negative feeling that never leaves you. It stays with you for life. And there's more than just one feeling. You have strong feelings of shame, guilt, anger, frustration, boredom, physical tiredness, disappointment, denial, carelessness, mental weakness, vulnerability, discomfort, and nervousness. You feel unwanted by everyone, never recognized, respected, and fully appreciated by anyone. Nobody can help you, and you feel like everything that you say and do, no matter good and bad it is, means nothing to anyone, and it is pointless. You feel left behind and far away from people, the world going crazy and never stopping. But in due time, the effects of being socially invisible can more than just destroy a person's self-esteem, personality, and moral guidance. It can turn a healthy human being into a cold, emotionless zombie with no sign of humanity or anything positive. And the worst part, people will stay silent and do nothing about it. They will say whatever they want, and sadly, they are going to be stubborn, ignorant, and naive about people being socially invisible. Anybody can be socially invisible. It knows no boundaries, and it slowly kills people like a disease with no known cure. Standing inside a crowded room filled with people and being ignored by them can deeply hurt someone in so many ways that they are forced to fully disappear, never returning to the real world. So I just wanted to leave this with somebody's true perspective on what it's like to be socially invisible.
What an incredible gift it is for someone to be so vulnerable and share that. Because I think if there's a takeaway for me today with all of this, it really is just to be more mindful of the people around me and what I can do to help them really show them value. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, if we show value to every person we encounter, and it doesn't take much, it's not hard, but if we can show value to each person we encounter, can we relieve some of this for another person? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know you've asked me this in the past, but you haven't asked me yet, so I'm going to jump the gun on you. What's my takeaway on this is get uncomfortable. I need to get uncomfortable with myself. I need to get uncomfortable when I'm feeling socially invisible to say something and to maybe call the elephant in the room. And if I see someone who I think may be in the throes of social invisibility, I'm going to take a chance, even if it's a stranger, and just go say hello, because you never know what that small connection might mean to somebody. And so that's my takeaway from all of this is I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to get outside of my comfort zone and I'm going to take a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff today, my friend. Thank you for giving me something to think about. I love this. Really is like a whole episode long food for thought, because it really has been like rolling around for me for since we started talking about it. So thank you for that.
Well, and thank you for diving in and finding all the information you did, because that's some stuff that I didn't come across. And I love when we do this research separately, because I think we naturally look at things so opposite of one another that we do go down and find different jewels on different sides that we can pull them all together and really try to get that full comprehensive perspective. So thanks again for digging in with me and finding what you found.
I'm pretty sure my phone just naturally goes mental health now, because that's kind of, I think it's part of me. This is where we go, me and my Apple iPhone. So
your phone heard what the topic was and says, I got this. Just here's all the things you need.
For sure. Well, no, this has been really good. And I look forward to what we chat about next week. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week around the round table.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. This podcast was recorded and edited by Jamie and Malin. Music by Famous Cats. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please email us at roundtablemindset@gmail.com. Text or call us at 402-819-8999, or join the conversation on Facebook at Roundtable Mindset Podcast.
and never miss a new episode by making sure you like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being our guest today. See you next time at the roundtable. And remember, your opinions and perspectives matter and are appreciated, but might not always be shared by others, and that's okay.